Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Sundance Books and Music live stream. My name is Emily. I'm the assistant manager here at Sundance, and today I have the honor of introducing our two guests, Emilly Prado and Elizabeth Gonzalez James. Both have new books out, which are available in the store or through our website. Emilly Prado is a writer, community organizer, and the prose instructor at the Independent Publishing Resource Center in Portland, Oregon. When not writing or teaching, Emilly moonlights as DJ Mommy Miami with Noche Libre, the Latinx DJ collective she co-founded in 2017. Her debut essay collection, Funeral for Flaca, was selected as Yossi Book Club Summer Reading Pick and has been called utterly vulnerable, bold, and unique by Ms. Magazine. Before becoming a writer, Elizabeth Gonzalez James was a waitress, a pollster, an Avon lady, and an opera singer. Her stories and essays have appeared in the Idaho Review, The Rumpus, Story South, Pank, and elsewhere. She's an alum of Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Tin House Writers Workshop, and Lit Camp. Her first novel, Mona at Sea, was chosen for the SFWP Literary Awards, judged by Carmen Maria Machado, and is out now from Santa Fe Writers Project. If you have any questions for our authors during the live stream, please leave them in the comments and we will get to as many as we can. Now, please join me in virtually welcoming our first reader, Emilly Prado.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here and to be discussing my work, but also Mona at Sea. I'm just grateful to be here. And just before I dive in and share a little bit about what I'm going to be reading, I want to acknowledge everyone who's showing up here today, especially in this virtual space, to be here. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. So Funeral for Flaca is a collection of essays that discusses my experience coming of age as a Chicana in the San Francisco Bay Area in a pretty white suburb, and then moving to Portland, Oregon, also one of the whitest cities in the United States. And some of the themes that my work explore is healing through trauma, whether it's through figuring out sort of identity, family secrets, this idea of truth, and how we write about truth as memoirists. My work also explores friendship and love, grief, and ultimately, again, like I mentioned, discusses what some sort of healing looks like and my journey through that. It's not something that's not like tidy and neat, but it is representative of where I'm at. And so each of the essays is titled after a song. It's part mixtape. As Emily mentioned, I'm also a DJ, and so that is a nod to my musical roots. This particular essay happens to take place when I am in high school, and the essays do progress chronologically with the narrative voice tied to the particular age that I'm at in the essay. So with that, I am going to read from essay number 8, which is called When You Gonna Give It Up to Me? Did you know 1 in 3 Latinas will become pregnant before the age of 20? I sure as hell do, thanks to the enthusiastic white lady from Planned Parenthood who seared it into my brain during one of her visits to our biology class near the end of 9th grade. Mr. Schnitz, with his knobby knees, bow ties, and 4 eyes, could instruct chromosomal curriculum and meiosis in his sleep, yet any steps beyond XX and XY would have caused him a malfunction. He was real sweet and probably loved listening to Coldplay on CD with his wife. But Mr. Schnitz stepped back to let the nice white lady do the talking when it came to the XXX. Barb was a safe sex zealot. She had dark hair and wasn't super old yet, 30 tops, and giggled as she released new facts into the classroom, letting them linger a little too long before saying another. She seemed equal parts excited and nervous, like the first day I worked at Toys R Us after getting away with lying about my birthday so I could work more hours. But Barb went above and beyond. There were anatomically correct plastic genitalia in different colors and sizes, pop quizzes, multi-choice and fill in the blank, and maybe even a condom-covered banana. Between facts, she'd offer her wisdom. The small, latched red plastic caboodle she brought to class had a slit in the top, and students could insert their folded-up top-secret sex questions. She'd answer them aloud. About 1 and 2 were jokes. I can't recall how my own pregnancy odds stacked up against the other minorities and underserved youth in the classroom, but I do remember it was so bad she repeated it twice. 1 in 3, she hissed, gaze oscillating, slowly turning her eyes around the beige linoleum box of a classroom to everyone, but especially wide-eyed at the handful of Black and brown girls in the room. The second time she said it, I think it echoed out into the hallway, what with all that doom and gloom she shoved out right alongside it. I'm sure the nice white lady didn't mean to single me or us statistically at-risk girls out in that suburban Bay Area high school classroom designed by a guy who designed the state's prisons. But when you're the hairy shell of a coconut in a sea of tender and sweet white meat, it's impossible not to feel like you've already fucked up a little bit. Plus, I knew if I was immediately doing the math and tallying up my classmates to predict which one of us would get pregnant on account of science, smug ass Timmy from the Sandcastles Hills sure as hell was too. All my life, I've been dodging the shitty statistics of being a brown girl in America. Most likely to drop out, most likely to attempt suicide, most likely to do drugs, most likely to become a teen mom, trademark. I had already achieved two superlatives on the list and a real one for best hair in middle school, but being a teen mom scared me the most. So all I had to do was to make it 6 more years to avoid falling victim to another brown girl stat. Did you know if you get pregnant, you only have 1 of 3 options? The nice instructor lady taught us that one too. You can keep it, give it away, or have an abortion. There was a 1 in 3 chance I'd have to make that decision. I could keep it, become a mom that almost flunked out of 8th grade, but then dropped out to raise her baby as best she could by working at Toys R Us for 20 years. I could look up an adoption how-to online to figure out how to give away my baby to a family, but they would have to be cool and rich and not racist, which would be hard to find. I could also take a $500 pill and make it go away if I had enough time, or suck it out with a $500 vacuum if I had less time. Between me and my cousin Amanda and my cousin Isela, one of us was destined, statistically speaking, to make the mistake of getting knocked up before really reaching adulthood. Amanda was really good at soccer, Isela was really rich, and I was the one really trying but failing with a 1.4 GPA freshman year. Right in the thick of figuring out whether we should take French or Spanish as an elective, sneak in peppermint schnapps or sour apple gin to the bowling alley, find a dress to wear to the homecoming dance, or pick out where we might apply to college one day, 1 in 3 of us would suddenly be forced to squeeze in some time to decide 1 of 3 choices for what to do with the growing embryo embedded in our body. Fuck that. And I'm going to pause there. And in addition to reading that piece, I'm going to read another small excerpt from another piece. I like to give a sampling during my readings, and you can always read more in my book. And this particular essay deals with my experience of applying the lens of transformative justice to my own life. For those of you who aren't familiar, transformative justice builds on this framework of restorative justice, which restorative justice, if you're like in a school setting, might look like one kid maybe pushes another kid, and your goal is to restore that relationship to prior to the harm being caused. So you might bring them together, you talk about, hey, it's not nice to push people, and then they can reconcile. With transformative justice, it's similar in that there is a look at how to repair, but the goal isn't to just simply restore, but to really look at transforming and zooming out. And so with that particular example, instead of looking at, the 2 students involved, you might also look at, well, does the student who pushed have a lot of energy that they need to get out? Is the school system supporting them by having ample time with recess? Do they have what they need at home emotionally? Do they have what they need emotionally at school? So it really looks at the systems in which harm is experienced, and also centers the victim or survivor or what have you at the heart of the conversation. So with that heavy preamble, this particular excerpt doesn't dive into details too much, but it does mention briefly assault. So if that's something that you are uncomfortable with, just want to give a warning. This reading excerpt will be about 5 minutes. And it is about thinking about healing and transformative justice through the lens of my experience as the survivor of assault. And it's called Mad. I'm gonna take one sip of water. My therapist asked me how I feel about healing. I pause for too long. I stretch a well as my mind teeters between calculations, turning over answers so quickly they melt into each other and become pudding. I string together something about defeat, that it feels like it's out of reach and that I reject the idea that states of being or harm can be fixed. I think healing sounds nice, but it sounds aspirational. I'm not sure what healed looks like. I forget to mention my answer changes depending on the day. She asks if I feel angry. I say I do. To have healing means to have been harmed. Healing invokes hurt. I'm mad. I'd prefer to have been preserved whole. I don't name the people or the systems out loud, but they fled me at once. When I was 5, when I was 6, when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 16, when I was born, today, tomorrow. I listened to a podcast about forgiveness. I think this might be a step towards healing, but there might be nothing that I hate more than to be asked for forgiveness. The audacity of a request to be absolved. I am no priest. I will not prescribe a few rote Hail Marys and eternal repentance. Forgiveness is mine and mine only. It will not be granted. It will not be doled. It will not be summoned by anyone other than myself. I conjure crisp essay theses, sentences, and titles. Quote, forgiveness is for white people. Quote, in defense of the schoolyard bully. Quote, when your heroes harm. I log them as fragments in my notes app. I think they are profound. But when I get around to trying to write them more fully, they often feel empty and small. I can't recall the part of my brain that was so sure of a sentence, the part that was sure I would and could return to flesh out the thought. It's not that I no longer believe forgiveness is for white people. It's that I don't know if I know what forgiveness is. I know what it is not. An apology or accountability. Quote, the journey to release all grudges, to relinquish the quest for revenge, and to let go of the fantasy of what might have been is one of the most difficult spiritual challenges we will ever face. Oprah Winfrey says of forgiveness on her podcast, Super Soul Conversations. The other side of forgiveness is freedom. I think this sounds nice. When I was in 5th grade, Miss Rook assigned a state research project to our class. We could pick any state except California. The coolest ones were claimed first. Hawaii, New York, Texas, Alaska. I kept my noodly fingers crossed and got my pick. Illinois, the state my papi lived in. My mommy took me to Walgreens and let me get the thick, fancy black foam board and sheets of thin red, white, and blue. I made the poster post 9/11 patriotic. I cut out squares and stars and used our printer instead of my messy handwriting to make sure my message was clear. I used AOL and checked out nonfiction books from our school library. Then I covered my ground. State flower, motto, flag, nickname, governor. I picked Oprah Winfrey for famous person. I wrote that Oprah grew up in poverty and was raised by a single mom. She was raped as a child, and she became one of the richest celebrities through her own hard work, her own version of an American dream. I wrote that me and my single mom watched the Oprah Winfrey Show together, which in 2001 had been on television more than 1.5 times as long as I'd been alive. Oprah helped people with her show. At that time, she had lived in Chicago for 17 years and will live there for another decade. I get a B on my project because Oprah was not born in Illinois. I still haven't forgiven Miss Rook. That's that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for sharing. All right, next we're going to have Elizabeth Gonzalez James reading from her book, Mona at Sea.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Emily, that was so beautiful. I so enjoyed hearing that. And I love your book. And thank you, Sundance Books, for having me today. I'm really excited to get to share with you guys. So I was thinking of reading, I'll read from the beginning of the book. Okay, so my book, Mona at Sea, is a dark comedy set during the Great Recession, and it's about a young woman named Mona who goes through a long period of unemployment and has to figure out what she's going to do with her life. So in the beginning, the year is 2009, and we meet Mona when she has grudgingly come to a support group for job seekers. So that's where we are. Folding chairs are arranged in a semicircle, and I grab the one closest to the door. As I'm chewing on a cuticle and trying to divine shapes in the brown grain of the carpet, a guy about my age sits next to me, and in between guttural attempts to clear his throat, I hear a wet, clicking sound that I identify as a tongue ring being rapped against teeth. Cringing at each thwack, I slouch lower in my seat, hoping he'll take the hint. He doesn't. Hey, he says. I ignore him, so he tries again. Hey, and he jabs an elbow into my arm. Do I know you, he asks. I look at him without blinking, but undaunted, he tries again. Did you go to Marana, class of '02? No, I say, I didn't go to Marana. Do you know Pokey, Worm's little brother? Did you used to party over at their place? Or the Pita Pit? Did you used to work at Pita Pit? I sit up straight and face him, too under-caffeinated and overstressed to continue this line of questioning. I don't know you, I say. I don't know Pokey or Worm or the place where they used to party. But he only shakes his head and sits back in his chair, pulling out his phone. Nah, dude, he says, I know you. I'ma figure it out. Don't worry. Mercifully, the door opens and an older woman with orange, fluffy hair and red paisley pants strides in and asks us to sit down. My seat companion pockets his phone and I resume chewing my cuticle, praying we won't have to give introductions. Welcome, job seekers, says the woman with a smile. My name is Paulette. Before we get started this morning, I want to give you one piece of advice. She reaches for a binder under her chair and removes a piece of paper, the word breathe written across it in black marker. She holds it forth like the 11th commandment and nods while we take in the power of her message. I want to tell you that I know where you're coming from, she says. I was a legal secretary for 17 years and got laid off after a merger. I searched high and low for another job, but at my age, and here she points to her head so we can all see her gray roots and know she's deliberately chosen carrot-colored hair. At my age, it's hard to convince employers to take a chance on you. So I started coming to church, and here I tune out for a while. I told my mom this meeting was a thin ruse to pack the pews on Sunday, but she wouldn't listen. And Jesus led me here, and I've been running these workshops for the last 3 years. Paulette finishes her spiel with a quick glance heavenward and says, now, let's get to know one another, shall we? The other job seekers stand one by one, give their name and sad situation, laid off, downsized, restructured, redundant. The day I started my senior year at the University of Arizona, France's largest bank halted withdrawals from 3 of its biggest funds, citing fears about a looming subprime mortgage crisis, effectively setting the stage for the Great Recession. How's that for a bad omen? As my turn to speak approaches, I consider running, but I only have 2 dimes in my purse. Where would I go? Tongue Ring is next. He's wearing white Pumas and the kind of denim pants that inhabit the strange, unnamed sartorial category between shorts and capris. His goatee tapers into a thin line that connects with his sideburns, and though he's dressed in athletic apparel, he looks no stranger to the Taco Bell drive-thru. What's up? He says. I'm Chasen. I work at Safeway. I used to do sheet metal fabrication, but I got fired. Here he pantomimes smoking a joint. I like working on cars, and I guess I'm a people person. He looks at me and winks, and I'm so appalled I can't even roll my eyes. I shouldn't be here. This feels too much like accepting defeat. I can't shake the image that somewhere in lower Manhattan, there's a building full of desks, and on one of those desks is a little brass and false wood nameplate that says Mona Morellis. It's my turn. I rise and face the room. Besides Chasen, I'm the youngest by at least 20 years. And looking down at my flip-flops and the Princess Jasmine t-shirt I slept in, I think the age difference is apparent to everyone else in the room, too. My name is Mona Morellis, I say. 8 months ago, I graduated from U of A with a major in finance. I got recruited out of college to work in an investment bank in New York, but that kind of fell through, so here I am. My heart is clanging so hard I can see it rising and falling under the swoop of Princess Jasmine's bubble braid. Since September, I've spoken only to my parents, my brother, and my best friend Ashley. Even the guy at the liquor store and I have worked out a system of grunts and head jerks. 30 unblinking eyes are making me bury my fingernails sharp into my palms as sweat trails down my sides. I can see the panic attack like it was a freight train, and me, my feet wedged between the rails. I suck in a breath and hold before letting it out slowly, trying not to look like I'm practicing Lamaze. Which bank? Paulette asks. My face reddens. Bannerman, I say, addressing the floor. There's a murmur. One woman whistles and lets out a low shit. Paulette tisks, and I can practically hear her face fall in pity. Truly, my story is the saddest of them all. When we're finished, I grab my purse and try to exit before anyone can speak to me, but I'm blocked by the other job seekers lingering to chat. In my haste to leave, I drop my keys, and when I come back up, Paulette is there holding her binder to her chest like a life preserver and giving me a warm, expectant look. So, she says, what did you think? Are you going to join us next week? Yeah, for sure. It was great. I definitely learned a lot. Paulette lets out a big breath like she'd been worried. I'm so glad. This is such a lonely process. It's good to be around other people who are going through it with you. I'm nodding, one eye on the sunlight streaming through a glass door. I'm about to thank her and make my escape when the light disappears behind Chasen, his arms folded and a smirk brightening his face, goatee to eyebrows. Sad millennial, he says, firing two finger guns at me. You're a sad millennial, aren't you? He punctuates his question by sucking saliva through the tongue ring and getting too much at the back of his throat, coughs into the crook of his elbow. My face is so hot, I think it might be glowing. I don't know you, I say, trying to avoid eye contact. What's sad millennial? Paulette asks. Chasen's face brightens more. Dude, me and my boy watched that video 100 times. And the auto-tune version, that was my ringtone. He pitches his voice up and sings, poorly. It's not fair. I ate my veggies. This is something on the internet, Paulette asks. You gotta look that shit. Chasen catches himself before a disapproving glance from Paulette. You gotta look it up. Bannerman had been cagey about a start date, a move I'd assumed was some abstruse hazing ritual inflicted on the new class of junior analysts. I'd been out of town with my parents, one last jaunt to Puerto Penasco to see the dolphins, and when we got back to Tucson, there was an email from HR demanding I be in New York the following morning. I don't remember packing. I don't remember how much my parents had to pay for a last-minute ticket or what Ashton Kutcher rom-com played on the in-flight headrest screens. I don't remember the cab ride to Bannerman's Wall Street headquarters other than the red wall of brake lights and car horns screaming infinitely before us. All I know is that when I got there, the front doors were locked, the side doors were locked, the back doors were locked, and by the time I woke up and took a look around me, I realized I was surrounded by well-dressed people hugging cardboard boxes and potted plants while they cried and cussed and smoked like it was some great unplanned funeral. Then there was the woman in a pink jacket and a small, mean face like a terrier. She practically kissed my lips with a microphone, a strong, astringent funk-like mouthwash coming off its foam head. A black-framed camera floated over her shoulder. Today was supposed to be your first day at Bannerman. You've got your suitcases. You must have just come from the airport. I hope you won't mind me saying, but you look young. This may have been your first job out of college. Coming here and finding out you no longer have a job, how does it feel? What's going through your head right now? It sucks, I said, blinking far too many times. I remember I couldn't look straight into the lens. The reporter slit her eyes, unimpressed with my brevity. Can you elaborate? I opened and closed my mouth a few times, trying to condense a brewing 10-minute polemic into a few sentences. I must have packed the breathing exercises I used to hold back my anxiety inside my bag with my pinstriped pants, because as I began to speak, I was aware that I was not taking in air, that the words were getting squeezed out in one long terminal gasp. It's not fair. I worked really hard to get this job. I was valedictorian. I was president of the investment club. I did everything right, everything. I said no to drugs. I stayed in school. I got straight A's and ate my veggies. And now I just want my job. I had 7 interviews to get this job. I beat out, I don't know how many people. I'm the first person Bannerman hired from Arizona in 10 years. I'm probably the only Latina in the new analyst class because all those investment banks are old boys clubs. I came all the way out from Tucson. My plane landed this morning. I don't have anywhere to stay. I don't know anyone in New York. I've got everything I own in these 2 suitcases. And I just, halfway through my speech, I'd felt my throat tightening. And even though I'd fought off the tears until then, they finally sputtered out of me as the horrible woman pushed the microphone closer, making sure no pathos went unfilmed. I don't know what to do, I sobbed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The church annex room has almost cleared. Dust motes pirouette in the morning sunshine. My face must look severe because now Chasen clears his throat and looks down at the carpet. For real, that sucks though. Did you get any money from the video? Yeah, I copyrighted it. What do you think? That's messed up. But hey, and Chasen cuffs me lightly on the shoulder, like we're friends. Someone will do something else stupid and pretty soon no one will remember you. There's always someone more screwed up than you. Thanks, I guess. Chasen moves off and Paulette gives me a small, encouraging smile that feels confidential, only for me. Do you know I saw Monica Lewinsky on TV? She asks quietly. Remember her? I didn't know this, but she was only 24 when all that happened. Can you imagine? Yeah, that's a lot. She was the only thing people talked about. It seemed like years, didn't it? And in all that time, the story was the same over and over. That homewrecker, that blue dress, how could she? Nobody ever bothered to look at it a different way. That here's this young woman and the most powerful man in the country. That maybe there was something else we weren't seeing. How did the reporter say it? Something like, what is it like to be the biggest punchline in the world? My eyes hurt and I realized I've stopped blinking. I'd underestimated Paulette with the breathe sign, but Christ, this lady is good. Do you have a journal? Paulette asks. It might help to write down what you're going through. You might not ever share it with anyone, and that's fine, but there's something about getting things down on paper that really helps you see the whole story, even if you're the only one reading it. I haven't, but thanks. I'll think about it, definitely. Paulette looks past me through the door. It's a beautiful day, she says, still smiling. There's that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's great. And once again, if you're interested in either Elizabeth or Emily's books, we do have them here at the store, or you can order them on our website, sundancebookstore.com. And now we're going to have a bit of a discussion. So I will open up the floor to Elizabeth and Emily. And there we go.
That was great. It was awesome to hear you read. And I just really enjoyed reading, but it's always great to hear the character in your voice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to go?
Sure. First, congratulations on your book. I know that we both have debuts right now. I have a few questions prepared, and I guess what I'll start with is one of the things that really stuck out to me from the beginning with your work is your use of humor and sarcasm. And I wanted to know more about how you approach this. As like humor writing something that comes naturally to you? Did Mona tell you that she needed to be sassy and sarcastic? What was that like for you?
Yeah, thank you for asking if Mona was the one who told me, because I feel like if I say that I wrote the book as a comedy because it had to be a comedy, like other writers will understand that, but I feel like that's not really a satisfying answer to an audience of non-writers. But yeah, it was always a comedy. And the first thing I knew when I started writing the book was that Mona, this isn't really a spoiler because it comes out in the first chapter, but Mona engages in self-mutilation. She's a cutter. And the first thing I knew about the story was that my character was a cutter. And I wanted to talk about that, but I wanted to see if I could talk about it not in in a comedic way, because I feel like comedy helps me get closer to really dark material. And I just find that there's stuff that you can be honest about with comedy that if you try to say it straight, at least for me, it doesn't have the same impact. I can't talk about it in the same way. And because the book deals with a lot of dark themes, I was able to, I think, get away with that because it's a dark comedy. If this was a drama, it would just be like kind of unbearable. Just all these like sad things happen to the character. But with comedy, we're okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a pressure relief. And I think like my work has some humor in it also. And I think for me, it's something that comes from a culture that often maybe uses humor to a detriment, where, like you're saying, humor is used as a way to get closer to things that maybe without that tinge of humor, we're afraid to get close to. Like you mentioned, it becomes unbearable. So I really resonated with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely saw the humor in some of your pieces as well. Um, and I going to the subject of getting close to dark material. Um, I wanted to know, was it difficult at any point for you to be so honest about your own life or to get close to these really touchy subjects? Because that was something that you did so well in your essays. You were so unflinching about yourself and about your experiences. Um, and yeah, as a fiction writer, I just make things up. If something is like, if there's something about me I don't want to write about, I'll just like, oh, now it's a cat. Okay, now I can talk about it. But when it's yourself, you never get to hide. So yeah, how was that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I have always been drawn to nonfiction, sort of first and foremost. When I was in middle school is when I first found writing, and I came to writing through journaling. And it's funny because I keep on being like, well, me and Mona, because I feel like me and Mona have a lot of similarities. But like I had, struggle. I talk about self-harm as well in my book, and having anger problems, and even talking about like the feeling in the throat, right, of like not being able to say what you need to say, and emotions taking over. And so writing was always the place that I felt like I could make sense of myself and the world and where I was in it. And so when it came to writing a book, I didn't really know what else to do but to do nonfiction and to go with memoir. And I have a tendency as a writer to lean on like my journalistic background and kind of do wide swaths of, zoomed out perspectives, and sometimes can go like a little analytical. So to hear also that it's resonating where I do go deeper, and I like have to really sometimes have other people also be like, it seems like you're writing around this, or you're not really getting at the heart of it. And I think that's where like writing community especially is helpful, because in memoir, it is just me, right? Looking at my memories and my experiences and trying to figure out a way to communicate those things. And also, I think it's natural to have a tendency to want to self-protect. And so it's helpful to have other people there to question certain things. And it definitely, there were points where it was really hard to write. And what I share about this book is that this is the book that, it's my first book, but I have been writing this other book for a long time. And that's like my like 10-year book that will hopefully come out eventually. I think that a lot of writers have that experience, where there's a book that usually takes a long time to come out because you're getting the confidence, you're like gaining the skills and all that. And that will be the book that takes extra time because it takes longer. And in the meantime, I came out with this book, and it was something that I didn't expect, but that helped me in getting close to those memories, because I didn't think anyone was going to read it. And it started as a class project, and allowed me to get a head start with some of that deepness. Otherwise, I think it would have been a little harder to dig in deeper there.
Yeah, and what you said about the writing community too is so important. Just having a group of people that you trust who can read your work and then basically like point out where, you know, I can see you're protecting yourself here, or I can see where you're protecting your character. You're steering away from what you need to be talking about here. And it's just one person's name on the book cover, but there are so many people that go into the creation of a book. I was so surprised, as I've been writing for about 10 years, and as I got deeper into the writing life, and I spent more time in writers groups and stuff, I was so surprised at just how much of a group process it is. And it continues to be a group process, because then you've got your agent who gives you notes, and you've got your editor who gives you notes, and then you know, it just goes on and on. But it's absolutely a collective experience, and a deeply personal one. It's weird.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's, you know, I love reading the acknowledgments now, because I'm like, oh, wow, here is the, you know, the village that it took for this book to come out.
Mm-hmm.
I
Absolutely.
would actually love to know a little bit more about just your experience in publishing. I know it's like Hispanic Heritage Month. For folks who don't know, particularly with fiction, I know that like in 2018, only 11% of books were written by authors who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. It's still hard out here, even though I think there is a lot of emphasis and you know, amazing authors that are coming out and work that's being celebrated. But with that, I wanted to know, yeah, if you could share just a little bit more about your experience of publishing, what it's been like for you, what has surprised you since your debut has come out. I know that's a giant question, but that's my question.
Yeah. So this, you mentioned like the 10-year novel. This might have been my 10-year novel. I don't know. This book, I started it in 2011, and it just came out this year, so that was 10 years. I started writing it when I was a stay-at-home mom and I had a baby, and I don't have an MFA. I'm self-taught, and I didn't know anything about writing a book, but I just thought, this is something that I've wanted to do for a while, and you know, I'm going to try it and see what happens. I finished it in 2015. I got an agent, and we went on submission, and everybody loved it, and nobody ended up picking it up. The feedback we got was, it's hilarious, we love it, we don't know how to market it. And so I got that email from my agent in 2016 that like nobody wants, which was basically, I'm really sorry, there's just nowhere else I can send this book out to. So I put it in a drawer, in a metaphorical drawer, for a few years. I started writing another book, and I would send this one out every now and again to small presses and to contests, not really expecting anything. And in 2019, I sent it to the Santa Fe Writers Project. They have an annual contest, and to my complete shock, I got named one of the finalists, and then they offered me a contract for publication. But yeah, it took absolutely forever. And I think I don't, Latinx writers are definitely 100% underrepresented in the publishing industry. That's indisputable. I'm not sure if the issue was that my character is Latina. I think the issue is that my character is just unpleasant. And I think publishers were like, I don't even know what to do with this chick. Which, you know, fair. I wrote her. I know what she's like. And I was kind of expecting that. But yeah, it's been a long road, and I am encouraged by the trends that I'm seeing in publishing now. Um, I know Sylvia Moreno Garcia and some other people have had wildly best-selling books. You know, but we still need more. We still need more diversity. We still need more representation, and we need to get to a situation where Latinx authors are not relegated to the small presses, where, you know, we're also getting the 7-figure deals and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. And so you self-published this book originally, right?
Yeah, so I was in actually the program that I teach in now, the Independent Publishing Resource Center. It was a prose certificate program, sort of similar. Like I hadn't had a background in writing, and I found this community workshop that was a year-long program, and it was in prose as well as in bookmaking and book arts. So I learned how to different methods for binding. And this particular book was half as long. I called it a chapbook. It was still pretty long, but I had designed it and cut the pages and glued the spine. And then what I didn't anticipate was, like you mentioned, it's classified then as self-published, and I had this outstanding sort of to-do list of like, well, I'll just like see if I can submit this or someone would be interested. It was about 100 pages long as far as like actual, when it's formatted. And then I started to notice right away that people were not interested because it was self-published, and that immediately was something that barred me from being able to submit it to contests or submit it to open submissions. And then at Future Tense Books, that's the publisher who ended up picking it up, I did know Kevin, who is the publisher, because he is the small press curator at Powell's Books, and they had agreed to carry the book when it was in its chapbook form, but I just sent it off when he had an open submission period. And luckily, he was interested and wasn't deterred by the fact that it had already had like a small audience prior. And then through that is when I worked with him on a very, very, very tight schedule, which I realize now understanding what goes into publishing and why there are such long runways often. I understand why they're long because we did this in, I think it was like 8 months or something between the time he had acquired it to the time that I revised it and added new essays. And one of the things that really surprised me also was just, like there's a question of what did you do after you finished writing the book? But for me, it's been continual revision of the book and adding new essays. And so it's hard for me to even pinpoint when exactly I finished writing the book. So I'm like, I don't really remember. It's a blur of this, 6-month span. And there's also, because of the shorter runway, there's been some, difficulty with like submitting it to places to get reviewed. And there's this norm of like publishing companion pieces prior to the publication. There's all these things that I had no idea about. And I've been equating publishing a book to having a manual for how to fly a plane, not drive a plane. And then like the last half is missing and you have all these pages ahead and you're like, I think I know how to do this. And then you're like, wow, there's all these things I had no idea, even though I felt deeply researched.
Yeah, totally. I think I have like a master's degree in like book promo and book publicity and publishing and all this stuff at this point. Like I know way too much about how the sausage is made. I actually wish I knew less.
Yeah.
But such is life. Yeah, in the self-publishing thing, I know what you're talking about. And I think that's such BS because if I recall correctly, 50 Shades of Grey was self-published. And then she like changed the character names and then it was bought by whoever it was bought. And, then the rest is history. So I feel like when a publisher wants to work with a self-published book, they will jump through any hoops. So that kind of distinction is completely artificial.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
But yeah.
It's also, there's like this preciousness too of like, well, so what if a few people have read it before? There's a new life that is given when something is traditionally published.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if anything, like, what do they call that? Like it's got a built-in audience, basically, if it's already come out, even in a different format. So, and anyways, so going back to your book, I love this line. We are girls who get guys, talk back to teachers, never pay for pot, pretend to be good, carry out covert 3-way calls, and learn from each other how to be better liars. I think that line is so great. And I get like a whole movie in my head from just that one sentence. And I wanted to know, when you were writing the book, how did you balance nostalgia for those days? with your desire now as a writer to like get it right and describe how things really were. Because I feel like that would be really hard as a memoirist to not put on rose-colored glasses or to at least strike a balance.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to not only, not have rose-colored glasses for particular like eras or times, but also just people um, beyond myself, also like people that I have relationships with. And part of that is really just thinking about, in order to be, in fiction terms, a full character, there needs to be duality. There needs to be the good and the bad. Like there is no perfect person in fiction or nonfiction. And so that's something that I kept sort of coming back to. And with the writing, particularly around high school, I do have a tendency to like lean on what I can find as truth. I'm trying to move away and move more into that imaginative space of like, I know how I felt and there is also truth in feeling. But where I have been at with this book is trying to really rely on memory. What can I actually remember? And then what other things do I have to back it up? And what happened with the high school era essays is that I had to get myself in the headspace where I was remembering what I did like about that time of my life, and that it wasn't all bad, even though even the segment that you read could be, I don't know, depending on the person, interpreted as like bad things. But those were like the sources of joy that I received from being in those spaces. And I also needed to balance it out with my diary at that point is what I had to remind me of what I didn't remember, which was how poorly a lot of boys or, young men in my life had been treating me at that age. And I think without the diary, I would have, again, maybe because my brain is trying to protect me, but wouldn't have been able to access some of that duality, because I have, certain memories of like my first boyfriend in high school being like this person who I really held on a pedestal, and remembering that things weren't great, but then seeing the diary and actually hearing from myself some of the ways that I had been treated was really surprising. And it's hard because I tried to also strike the balance of adult me knowing that it was wrong, but trying to write it from the perspective of younger me who didn't exactly know. And so that's why a lot of times it's kind of just stated as like, well, and this is what happened. And they're great though. It's fine because that's how I kind of felt at that time. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a challenge, but something I tried to not only apply to myself, but to other people in it as well.
Yeah, having that diary from high school must have been an absolute godsend for writing this.
Definitely. Yep. Thanks to my
Yeah.
sister for 13-year-old journal still continuing through high school, part of it. So I think we probably have time for like one more question. I don't know if there's anyone from the audience, but I would love to sneak in this question for you. So I, our work is different. Work's a novel, mine's a memoir. But one of the things that I think that our work shares is that sort of in simple terms, there's stories about learning to move forward and not necessarily move into this like perfect ending story, but of moving forward when a path doesn't work out as we are expected to, not only from like the pressure we put on ourselves, but also societally. And, you also, I think, write really beautifully, and just I felt so much to those moments of painful moments of, like I mentioned already, like self-harm and unemployment, and how hard that sense of like stagnation can be. And I wanted to know why it was important to write a book that really, I think, emphasizes this like non-linearity of life. And if you always knew that it was going to be a book that tackled a topic like this, or if it showed itself to you also.
Yeah, I went through my own experience of long-term unemployment in 2009. I went back to school in 2007 to get an MBA. I graduated in the winter of 2008, so like the literal worst time to graduate with a degree in business. And um, I was trying to get an entry-level job in corporate finance. Like, I wasn't even aiming that high. And I applied to between 300 and 400 jobs, and I didn't get anything. I couldn't even get like a part-time receptionist job. And then I got pregnant, and then I found myself taking care of a baby full time when I thought I was going to be like this career person. And so I really wanted to talk about, like you said, like the non-linearity of life, how, you have your plans and then something else happens, and just the kind of like adjustments that your brain has to go through over a long period of time to kind of catch up to, like, well, I thought I was going to be here and now I'm over here. So like, how your life puts you there, but your psyche is like not there yet. And also the experience of unemployment was the single biggest thing that happened to me in my adult life, the most transformative experience, more than becoming a mother, more than getting married, more than anything. It fundamentally shaped who I am and how I think. And the experience of unemployment is it's infinite. There's no guarantee you're going to get a job. You could be unemployed forever. And it's completely defined by submitting resumes, and then you sit there and you wait and see. And you do that every day, all day long, for months and months and months. And everything is out of your hands. Everything is up to luck and chance, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it just kind of made me see, like, taking the blinders off, just like, oh my God, this is so much of life. It's just this. It's just nothing is in your control, and everything is luck, and everything is just waiting to see. I don't know. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't. Maybe I'll still be here in 5 years. And yeah, and I wanted to talk about that in a novel. It was hard to find a narrative shape for something that has no narrative shape, but yeah, I really wanted to talk about the existential horror of being in that infinite space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you said. I think that's so perfect about life and putting you in situations, and then your brain, your psyche having to catch up. Because I think that, even if it's in this situation, unemployment, there's also things like grief, right, that are also limitless and go on forever. And I feel like that is such a universal theme, even through this particular lens. Just this idea of having to adapt and sometimes not, right? That sometimes you try and that you fail. So I just thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I think it's about time to wrap up. And since we don't have any questions from our audience, I just want to say thank you both so much for being here. It was great to hear you read and your thoughtful discussion, and we're just very grateful that you could join us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, thank you. And if you're ever in Reno, please stop by. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely.
And thank you everyone for watching. Yeah. Woohoo. Get the bugs. All right. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you next time. And everybody have a